It's Primus Tracks with Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! Primus fans, old and new. Primus fans. Hey, dog people, cat people, foreshadowing. Or Gila monster people, I guess. Welcome. You're all welcome. You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations. We are at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Twitter. I am Josh. Right over there is Frankie.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Frankie. And, oh my goodness, he had such a good time last time. We need him today. He is our newly minted senior bass analyst. It's our pleasure to welcome back Luis Ortega. Luis, thanks, man.
Hey, happy to be back.
We, of course, are going to be, in a little bit, we're going to be talking about Tommy the Cat, which is possibly the Primus track with the most notes as far as the bass goes, literally, with all the different things going on with the bass guitar, but also it's the one that people try to conquer the most, and it just seems to be impossible. I'm glad you're here to help us try to make sense of what's going on in this track. Once again, Luis is bass and vocals in a Los Angeles area Primus tribute band called Rapscallion, so go check him out. Let's welcome some folks to the Punch Bowl. You, of course, can join the Punch Bowl by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. DM us on Instagram if you like, if you're not an Apple product person. I'm not an Apple product person, so I can't even leave myself a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. So if you have the wherewithal to do so, please do, and you will be welcomed into the Punch Bowl. But our first entrant to the Punch Bowl today is Geestra, G-U-I-S-T-R-E. I'm going to go with Geestra, who says, "Thank you. As a longtime primate and actually good friend of Lessler and Herb, humble brag, thank you for all the details and insights. One special shout out that always gets forgotten, Cheney Claypool and Brad, I believe he means Brad Sands, tour manager that make it happen behind the curtain." So, well, thank you, person with a name that's hard to pronounce.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And if you're friends with Lessler and Tim, hook us up.
Yeah, please.
And our second inductee into the Punch Bowl today is Marcus the Super Mutant, who says simply to Josh, "Hope this makes you cry." The tears are welling up, buddy. Thanks, Marcus. I put out the invite to have people try to make me cry, and it hasn't happened yet, but Marcus gave it a shot. All right, let's do some miscellaneous debris. Especially for last week's episode for Is It Luck? It was even in my notes, and I can't believe I forgot to talk about this, but he rode to the rescue once again. Tim Soya Solian sent me a message and reminded me that Les Claypool on Is It Luck is playing with his hand, I think his pinky finger, maybe his ring finger also, on the tremolo bar for most of the tune, which gives that insane riff, that really elastic sound. Luis, is that one you've tried to tackle?
It's been a bit of a challenge, yes, because I happen to have a Kyler Tremolo hardware strapped on, but definitely have given it a go.
I would imagine without a tremolo that'd be kind of tough, since that's what gives it that very distinct, cartoony sound, I suppose.
What I've tried utilizing in place of that is the Digitech bass whammy for certain key parts where I can do a simple dive straight forward. I'm still experimenting with that. That's a little bit of a getting your foot technique down, though.
Oh, okay, so there is a workaround.
Yes, you can definitely. I'm finding myself having to experiment with tightening the. I would call it action, I suppose, on the actual foot pedal itself, so it's a bit more resistant and not so loose.
Oh.
It's easy to dive a little too much with that pedal. So yeah.
So you might sound like you're having too much fun if you're not dialing it back. So.
No, yeah, we don't want that. Yeah.
No, we don't. We're very disciplined here at Primus Tracks. Speaking of workarounds, Soya also pointed out, he said that Les's ADA rack mount system that he had early on was the source of his excellent distortion, that fry of distortion that we got for a little bit on Is It Luck, but also John the Fisherman. But Soya credited CG the Mexican with modding. I guess it was a guitar effects rack system, but CG was able to mod it for bass so that Les could use it. With his 4-string bass. And CG, I guess for a while he and Les were roommates, he had a side gig modding those kind of units under the name Go Mad Productions. All that great distortion we get to hear on John the Fisherman, Is It Luck, and so on on these early recordings, I guess credit goes to CG there.
We would be in total darkness without Tim.
Oh my gosh, without Soya, we would be, yeah, I know. Soya is so helpful, always after the fact, too, and tells us what we missed. So thank you, Soya. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
I was smart enough, actually, to ask him ahead of time about Tommy the Cat, so I've got a few things when we get there. The last piece of miscellaneous debris is that I reached out to Ron Rigler, engineer of Sailing the Seas of Cheese, and I asked him about my theory or my hypothesis about slowing down the track of Is It Luck for the spoken word part. And he had no recollection of that, and he guessed that that was not the case. If Les was actually going at album speed, he was speed talking there. He was channeling the Micro Machines guy, so he went really fast. He was going fast there. So
I think that was his vocal coach. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like he was able to do that. Good for him, because he's flying there. A titan of a track. We have this mammoth track, and of course I'm talking about Granddad's Little Ditty, track 8 from Sailing the Seas of Cheese. Whew. Just probably the most memorable Primus track. I am, of course, kidding. We do need to talk about Granddad, though. It does serve as a segue between the manic energy of Is It Luck and just the monolithic power, I guess, of Tommy the Cat. So there's this little segue in between, and Granddad's Little Ditty, continuing the trend, is what is part 2 of the Horn Dog trilogy, as I've called it. And as Ron Rigler told us a few episodes back, that's actually Les Claypool naked in the shower singing that song. And Ron said he ran the microphones in, and he didn't make any of his second engineers do that, so that was very kind of him.
Was that consensual? I mean, how'd that go?
Oh, great question. I would assume that Ron was comfortable with it, but sometimes anything to get that
That's
sound.
a good VIP question.
That's, yeah. Did Ron have to wear blinders or what? What was going on there, pal? So that is Les in the shower, no sound effects. That's him in the shower at the studio, live singing his song. And then that one, though, they did definitely slow down. As Ron said, he said they were probably stoned and thought it was funny, which was the impetus for slowing it down.
What's really cool about the performances of Tour de Fromage is that Les didn't sing the track the same one night to the other, because if you hear the recordings, there were some nights where he really extended the last word of the lyrics, and he made a really exaggerated operatic voice, which is really funny.
Yeah, he had a lot of fun with that over that tour, which is great. It's just another opportunity to be goofy with something and just kind of do what you want to do, because it's a goofy thing. Once again, this is a major label debut album. I don't think Britney Spears had anything like this on her first album, did she? Luis, you would know, I think.
Oh, Britney Spears, I think, definitely copied a little bit there.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to go check that one out. It's a nice little thing. There's, I don't think I had too much to say about it, actually, other than that. But we have, we have a guy talking about how he possibly pleasures himself too much, which fits the Horn Dog theme, which is the only thing I really wanted to point out. But Frankie, we also get a second mention of the word flatus, which you learned about in our Here Come the Masters episode. So there's more of that. And I really hope he wasn't actually breaking wind while recording that track, because poor Ron would have had to run the tape back. That's that. It's a nice little segue. Then they drop the Tommy the Cat bomb on us. So I want to set up Tommy the Cat with this. It's a track I've listened to 1,000 times, 2,000 times. I don't know how many times. Like I said in previous episodes, this is the one that stood out to me when I first heard Sailing the Seas of Cheese and sat there listening to it while I was dubbing it to a cassette. Listening to it when I was prepping for this, I had a weird emotional reaction to it. And I think it's because, to me, this is peak Primus. And I think this is peak Primus to a lot of people. When I want to spread the gospel of Primus, this is what I'm preaching. This is what I'm pushing to them. This might be one of the tunes or tracks that I would hand to somebody and say, this is the band. Not, I think you would like this band, but this is the band. And that's not to say we've reached the apex in this episode and it's all downhill from here. We're going to get back to the top of the mountain, guys. But to me, this track it's so inspired. Everything really coalesces beautifully on the studio version. It's tight. It's focused. And as we've said, and as we know, Les Claypool even knew he had a big track on his hands here and he wanted to save it for the right time. And I think he got his wish here. And I'm so glad, too, and Luis, I do want to hear your opinion on this. I'm so glad that there's reverb on the original release of this, because to me, Tommy the Cat just screams big rock song. which is what this is.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
And on that rhinoplasty recording of Tommy the Cat from 1997-98 New Year's Eve, he even says, now it's in reference to Larry, I think, playing Eruption before them playing Tommy the Cat, but he does say, it is now officially a big rock show. And that line, that saying is always in my head when I think about this track, too. This is what a big rock song should sound like, not Warrant or Rat or any of that nonsense. Def Leppard, I'm looking at you, blech. But it begs the question to me, what if Primus kept going in this direction, the Tommy the Cat direction? Like, could they have actually been radio darlings for the 90s, like the duration of the 90s? This band's most popular tunes have the most structure. Year of the Parrot is probably my favorite Primus track. I don't know why. I just love it so much. It's the loosest, wobbliest thing, and it sounds like it's going to fall apart at any minute. But this, and I'm not saying that Primus's most well-known songs are pop songs, but they have structure. They took the extra time to build them out to be something memorable and catchy, albeit left of center, because that's what they do. So for me, it's really hard, and I'm so glad you're here, Luis, because it's hard for me to talk about something that's so satisfying, energetic, seemingly perfect. And there's a whole lot behind this track to get to. So Luis and Frankie, let's try to unpack this humongous track.
It's like the centerpiece Primus song. I'm not sure how Les Claypool feels about that, but I think during live shows he always makes it a point to say, I'm not sure if I'm going to play this one tonight. I feel like it's their Smells Like Teen Spirit was to Nirvana is to Primus what Tommy the Cat is sometimes.
I think you're onto something there. It's not even their most played song on the radio, or the one that people know the most. It seems like, the layman knows, but Primus fans know it. I went to a show in 2013 with my friend Ken, who it was his first Primus show, and he loves the band. He said, I had an awesome time, but they didn't play Tommy the Cat, so he knew, like, that's one he wanted, but he didn't get it that night. So people want it.
And I believe Tommy was essentially Tommy from the Tommy Cranks band. That Claypool had said that Tommy from the Tommy Cranks band was kind of a ladies' man. So it was kind of a rooted inspiration there.
You bet. Yeah, we're going to definitely get into that and where he got that from. But it's straight from the Tommy Crank Band experience. And I think the Tommy Crank Band is still around. I was looking them up, and I saw some videos from the last few years, I think.
And that band is actually quite important in Les Claypool history, because Ray Wink used to play guitar in the Tommy Crank Band. He would later be immortalized by Les in Filipino Ray. It was actually Ray Wink who borrowed a guitar for Les Claypool to record the Too Many Puppies demo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and then Les ended up buying that guitar after Ray passed. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's got that guitar. That's pretty rad. So, yeah, the Tommy Crank Band plays a big part. So, and it looks like it's a big band. So I have to, like, a bunch of members. I wonder how many other tunes Mr. Claypool can extract from that experience at this point. Maybe we'll see a bunch more coming down the pike here. But Frankie, I'm going to turn it over to you for this track, because it has so many different versions and wrinkles to it, especially through its live history, but also through recorded performances for releases. We're talking about demos and the live version, of course, and Sailing the Seas of Trees. There's so many differences and so many little things. I guess we're going to kind of go in chronological order, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right. So with other songs, we've described the complete live history of the song from beginning to end, but with Tommy the Cat is a lot more complicated. So as Josh mentioned, we're going to go step by step, and we're going to make little stops in each one to discuss what's going on. So let's start with the origin of Tommy the Cat. So Les had a bass riff. He sat on it for a while, and he used to play it, and he knew that he had something really cool in his hands. And he mentioned at one point that someone that he knew at the time told him that the riff sounded like something crawling on the floor. At the beginning, he had just this bass riff, and then we're going to go into the lyrical construction later. But the first recording of Tommy the Cat appeared on the Primus Sucks or Sucking Songs demo tape from 1986. These versions circulated for a long time as part of a radio session, and then it was tagged at the end of the Sausage demo tape incorrectly. But the problem with that recording is that all of the sources that you hear have the same mistake. The tape jumps at one point and it sounds like it's spliced together, so it's missing a fragment of the song.
Show you, baby. Say, baby.
So the version that we have on the Primus Sox demo tape is actually complete, and it runs at the correct speed. So what is really interesting about this version is that it's really slow, at least compared to what we have later on Suck on This and Seas of Cheese. The main riff is there, but it's played much slower, to the point that it sounds, to a certain degree, less impressive than the Seas of Cheese version or the Suck on This version, but it's still there. You know, it's a really original riff from the get-go. The lyrics are basically intact, but as you know, Les is handling all the vocal duties. I would say that in this early version that we have in the demo tape, there is no bass solo. The one who sort of steals the show somehow is Todd Hood, because the guitar is what is really present throughout the track.
Yep.
So they would perform Tommy the Cat during the late 80s, as early as 1987. There are several recordings. Some of them are pretty good quality, and they have some, there's a really funny moment during a performance in Berkeley where Les is about to start the track, but then he notices that there's a student doing his homework in the middle of the show, and he says, "I can't believe it, this person is studying right here." Primus, music to study by. In 1988, they would still perform the track, but it wasn't until 1989 that the track started to take shape, and it became what we ended up hearing in Suck on This. I think a lot of people have heard the Stanford University Radio recording. In this broadcast, you can hear a much faster rendition of Tommy the Cat, and it actually has a really amazing bass solo. I guess we could start discussing 1989 Tommy the Cat right now.
So that one is performed on the Carl Thompson 4-string, and this is our first official release that has this track on it.
Well, when I've been listening to the Suck on This version of Tommy the Cat, it definitely sounds like the energy is there. I know that he's playing it on the 4-string Carl Thompson, and I keep that in mind. And the tone is a little bit more heavier on the mid-range side. I mean, I'm just geeking out on the bass tone and where the tempo's at with that. To me, the song always comes across as a real, essentially it is a storyteller piece. With that version, I can kind of tell that it's there, but not completely finished. I mean, obviously, we all know that since it was Suck on This live version. But when I listen to it, that's just where it's at for me. It's like I feel the energy, but it's still not quite there, at least for me.
You have been really working hard to get this bass riff down note for note. How helpful is it to listen to the Suck on This version? I mean, is it clearer than what you hear on the studio recording, or are there any hints that you can't get from any other version?
Well, definitely when Claypool's playing it on the 4-string bass, it cuts through the mix a lot better versus the 6-string fretless versions.
Yeah. With
the 6-string fretless versions, it's a little bit more and it's a little bit more buried. And when you have Claypool's famous highly percussive attack, almost that's why it has led to so much debate on how this riff is executed and why there's so many different interpretations. With the 4-string bass versions, you can definitely get a sense of clarity to it, but again, it's still hard to distinguish because Claypool is still very percussive in his attack. I would say the 4-string version is probably most popular with listeners because it has a bit more of a cut in regards to how the bass instrument cuts through the mix, and people can kind of hear the clarity of it a lot more than a 6-string fretless bass.
That's a great point. I remember there being a lot of debates, and this is like in the late 90s on the old Primus Bullboard, because, I had a really fulfilling teenage life. So, just hanging out on the internet.
Oh, you're on the Bullboard.
I was on the old Bullboard, and I remember that debate almost every week. Somebody had to drop in and go, "What's the deal with him playing it on the 4? He needs to play it on the 6. And then people going, "Well, it sounds stupid on the 6. He needs to play it on the 4. And then people saying, "I didn't even know he played it on a 4. It was always a topic of debate, and I never really had the words or the wherewithal to speak to it. But I've been thinking about it a lot, and I really do appreciate how, and I think you said it perfectly, how the 4-string really cuts through. I'm thinking about that Bonnaroo performance, because there's a really great video of it on YouTube, and you've been going after?
Yes, mainly because that 2011 live performance of Tommy the Cat seems to be the go-to for all the new age Primus fans from the past 5 or 10 years.
Okay, and I would assume it's the best video evidence that's out there.
In regards to having a much better close-up of what he's doing, yes, especially during that crazy bass solo.
That's on Frankie's list of 200 live versions to listen to today, so we'll get there and talk about it. I too, you know, on that Suck on This version, when he turns on that distortion, I wonder if that's some of CG's distortion as well, because during his bass solo on that track, he really goes places with that, and it sounds so good.
I have been pulling my hairs out, trying to stay true to the original bass sounds or tones and distortions to back then, and realizing that he had his buddies help basically kind of engineer or rewire his hardware in order to execute those sounds. It's like, oh, well, that's why. It's like, I've been chasing those sounds for well over 10 years. Oh, wow. And and it's like, where does he get that amazing distortion sound? Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I had to chime in there.
Well, no, this should be a sense of relief for all bass players out there who have been trying to figure this out. So everybody just
in other words, you can't get it.
It's not going to happen. Take a deep breath. Move on
and
with
get your own
life.
CG Mexican.
That's right. Find good old CG, and maybe it'll help you out. So, well, that's a great point. That a lot of people have been trying to chase this tone and chase this distortion, along with chasing the riff and trying to get it exactly right. I don't know, Frankie, I know you have a Primus Mystery of the Week, but this is the mystery. This riff is still the mystery. 29 years later, 30 years later. That's fascinating to hear somebody who knows what they're doing on the bass telling us this. This just blows me away. But you've heard a lot of different versions then as well, Louis. So he plays it on a lot of 4-string basses, the Carl Thompson, of course, which has since been retired from live performances. We've heard it on the jazz bass. We've heard it on the Pachyderm bass, of course. Have you listened to a lot of different live performances on different basses, and what are you hearing as far as his attack and approach? Is there any difference there, the way his hands are working?
The first thing, of course, is always the bass tone. The first time I ever heard and laid eyes on a live performance of Tommy the Cat was through an old VHS copy of Videoplasty. Wow, I couldn't believe how extremely clean his playing, his articulation was at such high speeds. And during that particular performance of Videoplasty, it was just, you don't even have to be a musician to be able to appreciate the obvious level of skill that took to execute. I love the era of, I believe it's going to have to be the Rhinoplasty and Brown album era of somewhere around those years, because that Fender jazz bass he was playing on sounded so punchy and so clean. I wish he would play on that a little bit more sometimes. That was probably my favorite 4-string version personally, was his performance on that jazz bass. It just had the most clarity and punch. Of course, there's a 2011 Bonnaroo live version, which he does on his Pachyderm bass, also mind-blowing, just high speed. I believe his sextuplet bass slap run that introduces the bass solo section that he explodes into clocks in at around 132 BPM.
Oh my!
And to do sextuplets at 132 BPM and have that much control over your hand movements and fingers at that speed is just, it's really amazing. And so there's that one. Of course, Suck on This version, and of course, Sailing the Seas of Cheese. I was fortunate enough to catch them during the Tour de Fromage. I believe it was the Fall Tour, the Fall Tour 2003 in October. I caught them in LA. I even posted the 6-string rainbow bass version that he performed that night on YouTube. If you want to check it out, it's on Nuke 97, and it's audio from that performance where he goes off on the 6-string rainbow bass, and the bass solo that he did that night is definitely my all-time favorite one he's ever done on the 6-string bass. It's just so incredible. And it also shows you why Tommy the Cat works just as well on a 6-string. It had this growl, this punch, this like this animal just sauntering through the jungle. It just had such an awesome low end growl from his 6-string bass during the Tour de Fromage. I love the way he performed it on the Fender Jazz, and I love the way he performed it on the 6-string rainbow bass. They both offer different types of personalities to the riff, so I'm kind of split on the middle. That's why I bought both a 4-string and a 6-string.
Very good. I do lean towards the 4 because of that clarity. And that's what I'm pulling this up because good old Soya said that on the, I believe the Brown album tour, when he was playing the Fender Jazz bass, at some point they played Tommy and the Awakening at a live show. Soya said to Les Claypool after that show, he said, "Finally, Tommy sounds killer again. That bass line needs a fretted 4-string." So that's where Soya is with it too. So I feel like I'm in good company with Soya telling Les, play that on the 4-string, man. But I will say it was awesome to see him play it on the Rainbow on the Fromage tour for sure. Speaking of Fromage and the 6-string, I guess, Frankie, let's fast forward to 1991 and Sailing the Seas of Cheese.
Right, so for Seas of Cheese, as we have discussed previously, Les got a tune bass, which is a fretted 6-string bass that you can actually see on the Bill and Ted Bogus Journey movie during the Battle of the Bands portion, where they are precisely playing Tommy the Cat. So that's the bass that Les used to record the song on the album, as well as Fish On and Jerry Was a Race Car Driver. So when we watch the videos of Jerry and Tommy, we assume that the Rainbow was used for the recording of the tracks themselves, but it wasn't that way. He actually used a tune bass, and you can actually see that bass in action as well in the Roskilde performance, which is readily available on YouTube.
Yep.
And it's a really interesting performance because he does this really intense bass solo on that particular performance. After the tune bass, the Rainbow, Carl Thompson arrived, and as we know, it was sent back for a modification. Once it returned, we would start hearing Tommy the Cat exclusively on the Rainbow bass through 1991 up until 1996 with Tim Alexander's departure. During this entire period of time, the song was performed on the Rainbow bass. And what is really interesting here, Josh and Luis, is that, well, first of all, we don't know why, after playing the track on the 4-string, Les suddenly decided to adapt the song to a 6-string bass. The other interesting thing as well is that it entered the live catalog played on the Rainbow bass, with really heavy rotation throughout the Seas of Cheese promotional tour. But then something really strange happened. We arrived to Pork Soda, and the song was only performed 3 times during the entire tour. Then it was performed again in 1995 for Punch Bowl, but just a handful of times.
Yeah.
It didn't appear that much, and it was also played a few times in 1996. And what's interesting about these performances is that Tommy the Cat became a very uncertain live track at this point, because you didn't know if you went to a Punch Bowl performance, you didn't know if you were getting a straightforward performance of the track as it appeared on the record, or if you were getting the experimental version, because they would also do a very strange version of Tommy the Cat during the Punch Bowl tour, where Les would start playing the riff, but he wouldn't sing all the lyrics complete, and he wouldn't do the bass solo, but they would improv. It was just a really strange version.
I think that's what I got when I saw him in 95 when I was 14 years old, because it was a weird, truncated version of Tommy the Cat. I remember being kind of weirded out by it because it was different at the time. I didn't know what to make of it, and I haven't gone back, and I don't think I've heard a recording of that version. I'm sure one exists, and probably on Toasterland. But
yeah, there are a couple of recordings, and
okay.
I can imagine that you were probably baffled by what they were doing with the track. But it was also performed by the Yellow Sock, and people can actually watch a good quality performance of that in the Animals DVD, which is basically a jazz version of Tommy the Cat.
Totally out of left field, totally different than anything you'll
absolutely
ever hear. Yes, it's silly.
It would be really interesting to have some input from Luis on why do you think Les Claypool decided to adapt the song to a 6-string bass after it was such a successful song on 4 strings?
At best, I would have to speculate about his reasoning to approaching a 6-string fretless bass and jumping from a conventional 4-string bass. But from what I've read during that era in their career, essentially was him just being curious, wanting to explore the possibilities of sounds that you can get from a fretless. I remember him in interviews saying that he was going through this period of wanting to slide into notes and was thinking more like a trombone player or
Okay.
or like a brass instrument jazz player in a sense.
Do you think this is around the time, too, when he's listening to a lot of Morphine, then?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. He was obviously Mark Sandman was a big influence, of course. Yeah. On top of that, I believe he was hanging around some of the jazz circles, and I think there was Charlie Christensen around that era. He's the guy who plays this incredible mutated stringed instrument that's half bass, half guitar, and he's just such a master at it. I believe Claypool even took him on to Prawn Song Records as his first sign-on. So I think there was some jazz influence going on for Claypool at that time.
You're talking about Charlie Hunter, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Charlie Hunter, I'm sorry. I said his name wrong.
No, I was thrown for a second, but yeah, the 8-string guitar, for sure, yeah.
And plus, I think he was experimenting with double tapping a little bit more so at that time, and he wanted to explore a more extended range instrument. I think he was just hitting a creative phase at that time, and he just wanted to see what the possibilities were. I guess sailing the seas of cheese, indeed.
That tracks for me because the next release after Sailing the Seas of Cheese is Miscellaneous Debris, which is 5 cover songs on the Rainbow bass. And those are 5 songs that do not need a 6-string fretless bass to play. So I think that was an exploration.
Oh, yeah. And, more power to him, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say that, Tommy the Cat is a monster live track, and it's always an absolute thrill to watch a live performance. But I do have to say the bass solo that Les plays on the studio track is something that he has never been able to replicate in a live setting. That bass solo, the exact way that it is performed on Seas of Cheese is something that if he just improvised in the studio or if he was just going with it, but I think it's something that has never been replicated. And it was played on a tune bass. So when they recorded the Tommy the Cat video, and he's actually playing along with the Rainbow bass, and they do a close-up of his hands performing the bass solo. Do you think, Luis, that what he's doing on the screen, as opposed to what is recorded on the track, is his best approximation at what could be the actual way to play the bass solo from the studio track?
I think what you're seeing in the Tommy the Cat video is, in fact, the way he executed it.
Nice. Yeah. But, it's something incredibly intricate, right?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I'm always talking about that first section that opens up the bass solo, and that's that sextuplet run. The Tommy the Cat track, I believe, clocks in at about 125 BPM, and we're talking about really tightly packed 16th note grooves that are happening. And it's also a testament to his endurance, because not only are you playing this riff, but you're playing this riff for almost 5 minutes. You just have to have the stamina for that. Yeah. And then on top of that, he explodes into an even faster bass lick that even outdoes the Tommy the Cat main riff. And then on top of that, of course, his exploration into sliding into those notes, and gotta hand it to him because no one else had really done that before. That I could think of within the rock realm at the time. At least I'm not conscious of. I guess I can demonstrate a little bit of it if the moment is all right.
Wow, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Oh, please do. Blow our heads off, man.
I'm gonna do it on the 4-string because for the sake of clarity, but I'm not. I'm just gonna essentially cover the sextuplet part, and I'm going to do it slowly, so, anybody who listens to this can kind of pick it up. I always tell every bass player that listens to the performance of the Tommy the Cat bass solo, and they're always lamenting, oh my gosh, I can never execute that, I can never do that. And the answer is you can't. Be persistent, consistent, and make sure you're practicing to a metronome, and build your speed and keep your notes clean. And so when it comes to the riff, so that's really slow. So what I'm doing here is you're holding your index finger slightly below the 5th fret. You're just resting your finger across the strings without pressing the strings down. You may get a little bit of a harmonic sound. And so with your thumb, you may have to study a little bit of what Claypool likes to refer to as thumping and plucking. And with Les Claypool, when it comes to the way he's striking the strings with his thumb, thumping, people call slapping, but he calls it thumping, he's always doing a downward strike motion. It's always the flat side of your thumb at a downward strike. Never double thumbing where you go. This is a double thumb, and that means I'm striking down, and then with the tip of my thumb, I'm striking back out. So I'm plucking out from the string. So he never really does that. He's always down strike thumbs. And that's what gets you that really chunky Claypool sound. Anyway, getting back to the sextuplet riff. So that right there is 2 thumb strikes down on the E string, while your index finger is hovered over the 5th fret, 1, 2. And this is the famous Claypool secret weapon, and it's a really simple move. The rest of his fretting hand, while your index finger is hovering over the 5th fret of your bass, your middle finger, ring finger, and pinky are essentially hanging out, right? So what Claypool does is, after those 2 thumb strikes, he throws the rest of his fingers down across the strings, making a muted slap sound. That sound right there is a huge component in Claypool's riffs, and it's also used in the Tommy the Cat bass riff, which has caused years of confusion for many bass players. Anyway, so 1, 2, throw your hands down. 1, 2, fingers down. Hit it again with your thumb strike while all your fingers are down on the strings. So 1, 2, 3. And you got to pick your fingers back up and pluck the muted G string. So, and then after you pluck the G string, you throw your fingers back down, doing that Les Claypool finger neck slap. That's my fretted hand, while my index finger is over the 5th fret. The rest of my fingers are thrown across the rest of the strings. You're not pressing the strings down, you're just throwing them on top enough to make a muted sound. So, I'm going to say you do that maybe 5-10 minutes a day for about a few weeks, and you'll get yourself up to Primus level speed. So that's essentially it for the sextuplet slap run in the intro to the Tommy the Cat bass solo. Sorry, it was a bit long-winded.
No, that was great. That really breaks it down, because it does sound like something that could be impossible, but to the way you break it down, it does sound attainable. And once you built up to speed, like I was ready for you just to continue the tune. Like that's what it sounds like. So that was great.
So Luis, let's say that somebody wants to play Tommy the Cat proficiently. How long would you say that takes?
Well, you just have to understand that there's some basics you have to get down. Basics in regards to technique. You got to develop a little of your thumping and plucking. You know. I would recommend to any bass player, learn what an octave is on your bass. You can say it's low E, and then your octave, which is your octave note of low E, which is your high E. Mm-hmm. And start with that shape. So slap, quiet, pop. Kind of focus on how your muscles and your fingers and your forearm, the mechanics of your hands, and smoothing them out. I had to start with learning some Primus songs all the way down to 50 BPM, 45 BPM. There's no shame in it. As long as you know you're getting the mechanics of your hands and fingers fluid, that's what matters no matter what. And then once you get the mechanics of your hands down, then you can go as fast as you want within reason and keep bumping up the metronome. It's all about the metronome and keeping your playing clean. When it comes to the Tommy the Cat riff, of course, there's a little bit of strumming. It's not too sophisticated, so that is what they call an open 5 or a power chord, which is the E, and a B note on your D and G string, which is 2nd and 4th fret. So right there, I'm like doing a hand strum essentially, fingers down, and then I brush up with my thumb. Of course, getting into the next section of this Time of the Cat bass riff is where all the controversy happens because there's 1,000 interpretations of this riff, and I'm going to point the finger at Les Claypool's approach of how he utilizes muting techniques,
right,
and how sometimes they can be interpreted as a note when in fact it's just a mute.
And that's the thing for when I first heard Sailing the Seas of Cheese and I first heard this track, I loved this track, but then I was trying to listen to the bass line. It sounded exceedingly simple, I thought, and I, of course, couldn't be further from the truth. You talked about the approach and the attack and the clarity, but the way that it's recorded on Seas of Cheese, that clarity is lacking in a lot of parts, so it's hard to tell what is going on. And I think that's where a lot of those misinterpretations are cropping up.
And, you have Claypool jumping between 4 strings and 6 strings, and then every time they've performed it live, they're also not playing. I'm not criticizing their performances in any way, by the way, disclaimer there. They just feel it out differently on stage every time. They have a different feel approach. There's a different amount of bars per verses sometimes during live performances versus other performances, or shorter sections. Little nuances like that in the arrangements live. But when it comes to the main riff, where the controversy happens, and I say that kind of jokingly, but there is just a billion bass players who'll say no matter how you play it, they're going to say you're playing it wrong. So I'm going to try and just cover as fast as I can without getting too wordy all the different variations of this riff, and I'm going to go with 3, maybe 4 at most. I'm going to reference Cover Solutions because he's a very popular YouTube bassist, and he provides a rhythmic notation and tablature. And if you're a bass player who's starting out, please learn rhythm notation. It's super fun and it's not complicated. If you learn what the difference between quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, and all that jazz, you're going to become that much better and more awesome of a player in no time. And people will respect you more. If you know, I was an eighth note off, you'll find yourself surrounded by different class of musicians in no time. So
I don't know about you, Josh, but I was jamming to that.
Oh yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out too is when you are playing it at 20% and then 30% and then 40%, it starts to form. It is so fascinating to hear it that slow because it doesn't sound like anything. And then as you start speeding it up, that's it. I don't know, other simpler riffs or something. Like if I was playing Seek and Destroy by Metallica, right, on my guitar, and I was playing it at 25% of the speed, you'd still know that's what that was, probably.
Oh, yeah, and it's so interesting how this riff and riffs in general have such an interesting quality at different speeds. Sometimes I prefer hearing the riff at a slower speed. It sounds kind of groovier and kind of like a dance almost. All the riffs that I'm about to do for Time of the Cat right now, these are going to be deliberately at a slower tempo, and for the purpose of analyzing and understanding the different interpretations that are out there on the internet. This one that I'm citing, again, is from Cover Solutions on YouTube. So with Cover Solutions, he believes this version is it. Another bassist, and again, I'm citing these guys out of respect as a bass player, and for other bassists out there who are listening to this who would like some references, also check out Talking Bass. I know this guy has suffered in regards to listening to this track extensively, slowing down the bass track, and really trying to decipher what is going on because of the percussive nature of Claypool's playing. And one of the things that he points out is the thing that I was referring to earlier, which is the left-handed neck slap that Claypool utilizes a lot. And this is something that I believe is responsible for a lot of players thinking that Claypool is hammering on from the G note to the A note. This is Talking Bass's Tommy the Cat bass version, which I tend to favor as the version personally. So. And the thing that he's doing different here is that right there, where most people would say what Talking Bass is doing is this. Thumb strike, G note, left hand slap, mute. That's a small detail that's really hard to pick up on at 125 BPM and would drive any bass player crazy trying to figure out.
That is one tiny subtle difference, though, and it makes a world of it, though. I guess it changes your whole approach, right? If you're going to have that one little left hand.
Oh, yeah. And a huge example of Claypool using it is in My Name is Mud. When he's doing the verses for My Name is Mud, everything he's doing is a percussive attack. And he's utilizing the left hand slap, and he's also using his elbow for extra muting for My Name is Mud. So Claypool definitely utilizes a lot of cool approaches to getting a specific percussive sound. And the last version that I'd like to touch on is the one where some argue that there's an open low E note. So some people will say that's there. And again, these are all at slow tempo. This is not a true album tempo.
Yeah.
Again, just for the sake of demonstration. So this is not to be taken as the definitive cover of these songs, but again, for analyzation purposes. So when you speed these versions up to 125 BPM with your own playing, you'll understand it. The version that I feel most comfortable with and that I agree on when you get it up to tempo is the one by Talking Bass on YouTube. And I know that he's done his research because I relate to him because I've done it myself extensively. You'll hear the differences. The one thing that's always consistent with all the variations is that there's legato on the high G note here. So that note is always legato as much as you can. A lot of players will like to cut that short and make it a lot more staccato.
Yeah.
And you want that note to ring a bit. But anyway, as best as I could, trying to represent some of the variations that are most popular out there at slower tempos.
So here's what I'm getting from all this. Nobody knows. There. Claypool's never sat down and taught anybody, and so not even in the official transcription books will you get a very accurate thing there. So unless Claypool himself sits down and ends the debate once and for all of us, hopefully one day, no one really knows. I think that lends to the appreciation of the track for me, though, that it's that hard to recreate. And that goes back to what something Soya was telling me, that he and Les were talking about how that riff is so complicated that really nobody else can play it correctly. And I guess Les started, this must have been over in Europe, Les started pulling people out of the crowd and saying, oh, you know how to play Tommy the Cat? Come up and play it. And Soya said it was fail city every time they tried that nobody could even come close, So they stopped doing that after a while. But just the idea that there are people out there who think they've got it, and then they, then, okay, I'm done. But it sounds like it hasn't been settled yet. And that's absolutely okay. I really appreciate that this is still something that we're talking about 30 years after this song hit it big. So thank you for showing us those three versions, though, because those differences are so subtle, and who knows if we'll ever agree. Before we get into live versions, we haven't even talked about the studio track other than the bass, which, of course, is the focal point, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. So there's a couple of things I wanted to point out on our Caesar Cheese recording. Of course, we have Tom Waits as the voice of Tommy the Cat. If you didn't know that, in the club now, you know. But with the studio version, we don't have a vocal intro like we do on Suck on This and the demos. That's replaced by that drum lick to kick things off. The other thing I want to say about the drums is there's some interesting stuff going on that, first of all, the double kick that Tim is doing really propels this track, and you do not hear that on the demo version. The demo version is kind of like a weird lounge, not a lounge version, but it is slow, and just has a total different vibe, because this studio recording is much faster than what we've heard before as far as tempo goes. And if you compare that demo to what we get on the studio version, Tim has so many embellishments and little fills here and there, and he's tighter on the hi-hat, especially during the verses, because it really helps lend to that atmosphere of this track. But I think that's one of Tim's strengths, which is really pushing Les Claypool as far as tempo and attack, too, because Tim can just bring the thunder whenever he wants. And that's something I think he was pushing Les a lot, and that's something Les said a lot of years ago was, just the way he played, Les had to keep up, in some regards. And I think this track is showing that to a degree because he's playing this. They're playing it so fast. There's just so much hi-hat work going on. Oh my gosh, the drums are just so great. Everything about this track is so great. This is what I said at the outset. I can't talk about something that I think is nearly perfect because there's nothing to talk about. I do want to point out too. There's the drums just. If you're a drummer, this is a great song to learn. If you're a bass player, this is a fantastic song to learn. If you're a guitar player, hey, there's something here for you too. Because if you listen to that riff at the start, that Todd Huth riff that Larry plays, especially if you listen to the demo version, like just imagine that your cat wants to go outside and the door is closed. That's the sound they make when they want to go outside. That's what they do. That sound is that's the sound that Todd makes and Larry replicates that. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog. She's starting to freak out.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that thinks the guitar sounds like a cat.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is a cat doing some kind of growl. But that's what I see when I hear it. And that's what I've been hearing for 30 years or seeing for 30 years. So once again, hats off to Todd Huth for making this such a visual feast, even though he's playing guitar, really helps us visualize what's going on with this tune. And of course, we get a great solo from Larry, a nice extended solo. Fun fact, he's actually playing a different guitar on this track. He's playing a 62 Strat that he borrowed from Kirk Hammett. And if you're curious, you can see that guitar in the video for Metallica's song One. So that's a cool little connection.
I want to give a shout out to a friend of mine who lives in Alaska. He's a massive Primus fan. His name is Travis, and
hey, Travis.
He follows the podcast. And Travis actually owns the guitar that Larry used for the music video of Tommy the Cat. So this guitar was very silently auctioned on eBay. It didn't have a lot of coverage. And that's, it's because of that Travis was able to win the guitar without splashing a ton of cash. In the beginning, he didn't think that it was real. Then they sent him a photo of Larry holding the guitar. That's when he realized that he had just gotten an actual piece of Primus history. And then, he had the opportunity to talk to Larry for a bit during a Q&A, and he showed him pictures of the guitar, and I've seen a picture of Travis speaking with Larry, and Larry just looks absolutely thrilled. I'm sure that he's really glad that it's a true Primus fan who ended up with that piece of Primus history. And I'm not trying to rush anything. I'm not trying to be ominous at all. But Travis actually said that he's gonna leave that guitar for me in his will.
What? What? Oh my gosh. Travis, please buy a life insurance policy too. Well, Travis, you're a very kind person, and that's going to go straight into the Frankie Primus Museum that's opening in 2027 in Mexico City. It's going to be great. I like that you said you don't want to rush anything. Travis, hurry up, would you? Wow. Well, that's fantastic. And I had no idea. I didn't know that guitar had been auctioned. I didn't know anything about that guitar. So I'm floored by that whole thing. Frankie, you're full of surprises.
Shout out to Travis. He's a really cool guy.
Definitely, Travis. Thanks for that. Thanks for keeping it in the family, I guess.
And shout out to Lur for ripping such an amazing solo. I mean, I don't think people talk about his guitar solo in Tommy the Cat enough. He's really shredding.
He really is, and that's like this solo that's on the record is just phenomenal. He really goes off the wall with it and kind of makes it his moment. And I call it peak Primus because he's shredding this solo over the main riff and then over that descending riff when Tim goes into the double kick mode. And that, to me, like, that's the squealing moment for me where I just go, I'm losing my mind, it's so beautiful! And it's too much for me. It's everything that I want out of music, I guess. I don't know. I'm having a weird day, guys. This is...
You're having a double rainbow moment.
I don't know. This is so bizarre because it's just, I feel like that, like I said, I call it peak Primus, but I have ascended, I've been carried into the heavens of music. Luis, you're absolutely right. He's playing this killer solo. Les is doing that descending line, which I think that's a lot of strumming and then back to the main riff, I think. Is that right? He's strumming chromatically down the fretboard.
Oh yeah, and he's still messing around with 16th note variations within that strumming too on top of it. I mean, yeah. He's always got like a hop going on in his overall groove in Tommy the Cat. I'm just amazed at Larry being able to play over be able to play over those changes. I mean, I would love to just ask Lur, dude, how did you figure out how to make up any guitar lines on top of what Claypool is doing? Like, seriously.
Oh, yeah,
how do you do it?
There's just so much, especially with this track, it's just filthy bass the entire time. Without even getting any words, this is the crash course in it. This is how you do it. And, Larry's not present for a lot of this track during the vocal narration, right? And there's some soloing here and there for the bass with the main riff and then after the solo. But he gets in that main riff and that just dynamite solo. And then after a while he changed his solo live because the Rhinoplasty recording we got is a different guitar solo. And so I want to say around the Brown album is when he changed the guitar solo and kind of stuck with that one for a while. Guys, I'm going to pause it right there. We talked for over 2.5 hours. So to maintain your sanity, I'm breaking this up into 2 episodes. So consider this Tommy the Cat Part 1. We'll be back next week to wrap it up with Tommy the Cat Part 2. I promise you won't be disappointed. Later days. Willie Mays. Thanks, Frankie.